This is the Cedar Creek Church Living It Out podcast, a midweek reminder where we discuss key takeaways and principles from the weekend message to help you live out the truth that you matter.
Well, welcome to the Living It Out podcast. My name is Ben Bockert here with Cindy Casey. Cindy, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Ben?
Great. We are in a new year.
Yes, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year 2022. Are you like a New Year person? You like resolutions? What are your thoughts around the new year?
You know what? I don't do resolutions, but I do write down a list of goals that I have for the year that I have to look at on a regular basis, just to remind myself of things that I want to do, things I want to get done, spiritually, physically, financially. So I do set goals.
That's good. I'm not a big resolution person. I just have seen, I think I've personally done this and have seen so many people do this where they're like, I'm going to do this year. And then it's like second week of January is just fizzled out. And so, but goals I think are good. Yeah. I'm working towards these things. This is what I want to accomplish by this amount of time, and just a chance to kind of reevaluate, establish current reality. How's my family life going? How's my marriage going? How's work life going? How's, all these different areas that you can have a chance to kind of look at and think about. So
yeah, it's really fun at the end of the year also for me to look at that list and see what I was able to accomplish and get done as I set the next year goals.
Right. So for you, if you're a resolution person or you have goals, definitely thinking about that and be praying over those. We have 21 days of prayer coming up, which we'll talk about. I think that it can be a huge part of all of that as well. So this weekend, Chris Bainey gave a great talk on the wonder of joy, and we're going to be talking through that. Again, these podcasts are often really a midweek reminder of like, hey, this is what we talked about last weekend, just to remind everybody, and here's some things, and how's it going this week. So I wanted to start with an icebreaker around that. And this is the question that Chris Bainey asked: what was the most joyful experience you had this past year, or one of the most joyful experiences?
Yeah, I thought about this question and a couple of things came up in my head, but I'm going to say, because it was spontaneous, my husband and I took a day and we went to Amish country. And it was just so relaxing, no agenda. I mean, we were just kind of stopping at different places, and it was so much fun, and it was joy-filled. We met a Christian woman, and just to hear her story and her testimony, it just really brought joy to us.
Yeah, that's great. I can relate to that because Mary and I have been married for 10 years now.
Wow.
Actually 11 years. And we didn't do anything for a 10-year. It was in the middle of, 2020 pandemic, and it just wasn't a great time to go off and do anything. So we got away this year and in 2021, and we went up north to like Ludington area, Lake Michigan.
Yes.
And it was just a ton of fun. So that would probably be one of the most joyful things, just because we haven't done it for a long time. So
yeah, there's something about that time together and no plans, just having that time uninterrupted.
For sure. So getting into Chris's message, he talked about what are the main traits you associate with Jesus? And I thought that was a great question. And is joy one of those traits that you kind of, when you think of him, you think, oh, yeah, joy, right?
Yeah, I don't know about you, Ben, but I was like, ooh, joy was not one of them. Sacrificial, faithful were some of those traits that come to mind when I think about Jesus. But listening to his message, I was like, oh, I can see the joy. He had to have joy to complete the sacrifice that he had for us. So
yeah, I think it was an interesting thing to just kind of put your head around and say, okay, when you think of Jesus, what do you think about? Because I think we do think compassionate, loving, serving, humble, but, is joy one of them? And I thought Chris did a great job of just saying, hey, this is the reason he's, joyful. The anointing on him, I thought, was a really interesting verse to start with. And then he also just talked about, kids loved to be around Jesus. And I know when I go to family parties, there's a couple individuals that the kids gravitate towards because they're fun and they're joyful and they get, down with the kids and they get, to their level. And not that they don't, enjoy everybody there, but they just, there's like a magnetism a little bit. And I think Jesus had that based on, what we know of him. He talked about the party, the wedding party. He made the water into wine, and people just liked to be around Jesus. So I think the series Chosen, have you listened or watched that at all?
Yes.
I think that gives a good spin. And then there's a lot of, stories that are not biblical, and they embellish things and kind of say, hey, this is what it could have been like. But they do paint Jesus as, a jokester at times and fun and, enjoyable. I think that's kind of sometimes good to kind of just take in and say, okay, just allow yourself to imagine what his life would have been like and who he was.
I agree. Not everything was serious. Can you imagine what the disciples thought when they had to feed the thousands with a couple of fish and bread? I mean, I would have laughed.
Yeah, for sure. Now, we'll ask this question. And I think, Chris, I'm just going to start talking about it because I don't want to just throw it at you, but Chris asked about what makes joy difficult. And one of the things I really liked was a quote that he shared. And I can't think of who the quote was from, but he said that negativity sticks to our minds like Velcro, but those positive experiences are more like Teflon.
Yeah.
They easily slip away or are gone or removed. And I thought that was super interesting. What are some things you thought about that?
As far as times that it's difficult to find joy. I think when we're not feeling well physically, it's a little difficult. Or when we see people that we care about that aren't doing well, that's difficult. But, again, like when we have that joy, that Teflon, it's like we don't stay there, though. It doesn't stay stuck forever. It does slide off, and then we go into the next season and we see where God is so faithful.
Yeah. He talked about God's joy is being relational. And he really said, if you want to be joyful, the best way to do that is to emulate Jesus. And he shared a verse from John 15:11-12. He says, I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My commandment is this: love each other as I have loved you. And I just thought that was such a great verse where he talked about, being obedient to God is one of the ways that we can be joyful. And just, following him, being obedient. And I think that just that relational piece of he is our source of joy.
Yeah. And his joy is in us. That reminder that, my joy may be in you. We have the joy of Jesus. And, we are so blessed to have that, because when we look at the world, we don't see that they always have that same joy. And what a difference, it makes in our attitudes about life.
Right. And I think, he talked about joy being, it's not circumstantial.
Right.
It's, it's in us.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what's going on around us. It's the joy that we have in Jesus. And I think, especially for what we've been going through over the last few years, if 2020 was a bad year and 2021 was a bad year, that doesn't mean that we can't find joy.
Absolutely.
You can still look back at last year and say, last year was great for me. It was joyful, despite all the, things going on in our world. It can still be joyful. So I thought those were all great things. He also talked about the Apostle Paul, who was in prison. And in prison, he penned a letter, which is the book of Philippians. And he really pulled out some great things from there. And one of the first things he pulled out was always be joyful. And that's kind of what Paul wrote from prison. He's saying, hey, always be joyful. And you're like, I felt Chris did a great job. He's like, if I would have wrote a letter, it would have been like, help, come save me. I don't belong here.
Yeah.
And Apostle Paul saying, hey, always be joyful. Remember, the Lord is coming soon, which as Christians, that should bring us hope and joy. So I think that's something that I like. I know I like to study and think about and learn about. I know you and your husband, Jim, as well. So as Christians, that can bring us joy and hope. And you said it's not just an emotional response to your circumstances, but a condition of your heart, which we just talked about a little bit.
Yeah. And I love the example of Paul, because we know that, while he was in prison, he was singing songs of praise. Yeah. And that can only come from having joy in your heart.
Right. Yeah. Can you imagine?
No. Yeah.
Man. So there's really three key things that he talked about from Philippians 4:6-7. He said, do not worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. So what are some things that we can learn from from that Chris talked about?
Just this morning when I had my quiet time, and it says, don't worry about anything, instead pray about everything. I try to thank God every single day for the blessings that I have, and not so much what I don't have. There are times that we may ask God to give us something. My husband's not feeling well, so I prayed with him this morning that he would feel better. But, then I took the time to thank God for everything that I have, my family, my health,
Right.
our home, our friends. So we are just so blessed. And those are the things that we have to look at
Right.
instead of worrying.
Yeah, I agree. I think that idea of, Chris said, worry is a joy, thief, or
Yes.
steals our joy, and then prayer is an opportunity really to connect with the one who's the source of joy. So being able to go to him and talk to him, and as you have that relationship with him, receiving joy from him, it becomes an outflow of the heart, which is definitely key. And then gratitude, which you just talked about, I think that's huge. Being able to think about, okay, what has God given me? Not just what don't I have, or what am I missing, or what do I think I need, but what has God given me that I can be thankful for today?
Yeah, we have both been on mission trips, Ben, and we have seen other countries that they don't have what we have. And if we can just, remind ourselves on a regular basis that we have so much, we are so blessed, even during a pandemic, we still have so much to be grateful for.
Yeah. And one of the things that Chris talked about was a friend of his who's, I think they did like a 30-day gratitude challenge, or I'm not exactly sure what the parameters to it were, but basically he had to write something down that he was thankful for, and then the next day something different.
Yep.
And it could never be the same thing. And he's like, by the end of it, he was like, oh, I think I'm thankful for the dew on the grass and this cup,
Yes.
cup of coffee. And it just forces you to, really be like, hey, what are the things in my life that I take for granted that I should be grateful for? So that's definitely an option. If you're listening, you're like, man, I don't think I'm a very grateful person. That's something that I know I can do, and potentially you as a listener can as well.
Yeah, I agree. There have been times when I've had different women's groups where, I asked them to write down 100 things that they are thankful for. And, the smallest things like hot water when you take a shower.
Right.
I mean, we take for
Right.
granted that we're going to get in the shower and it's going to be warm water. So, just being grateful for all those little things that are truly blessings from God.
Yeah, you were just talking about a missions trip and hot water. There was no hot water
Right.
on a lot of those mission trips, no air conditioner, like
Yeah.
a lot of those things. And we'd come back to the States and be like, oh my goodness, a water fountain.
Yeah,
And,
even the fact that we can flush our toilet paper.
Yeah,
I know that
right.
sounds crazy, but yeah, they just can't do that in other countries.
Yeah, we should be very grateful. The last thing he talked about was controlled thinking. And the verse says, fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. What are some things that kind of stood out to you when Chris talked through that?
Oh, you know what? It goes back to, the negative thinking and how
Right.
we can just really get focused on, self-loathing almost. But God tells us to think about what is good and holy and pure. And so just reminding ourselves that we have so many things in our lives that we can think about that are good. We have people that love us
Right.
and care for us, and, just the blessings and not being stuck on those negatives. It's so unhealthy physically, emotionally, spiritually.
Right.
It's just not good for us.
I liked that Chris just brought it to like a really simple thing too. Is like, he's like, when you look in the mirror in the morning, what are some of the first thoughts you have?
Yeah.
What are, they could be about yourself. They could be about how you feel. They could be about how you look, all these different things, is like, are those excellent thoughts? And if they're not, you don't have to dwell on those things. You can let them go. You can instead, through that relationship with God, understand who you are, who he's created you to be, be grateful for the things he's given you. Those are excellent. Those are worthy thoughts that you can think about. So if that's something that you're struggling with, I would just encourage you to capture those thoughts, take them captive and say, I'm not going to be thinking about these things today. I'm not going to let them, start my day off and rule how I live my life. So,
yeah.
what is the kind of the practical step that Chris gave us?
Well, you talked about spending our 15 minutes of quiet time with God each day. And I know for me how important that is to do that right away in the morning, to get up and spend some time with God. I grab my coffee and I sit down and I have my quiet time because that's so important for me to be able to get up and start my day. And even this morning, I talked about my husband wasn't feeling well and just praying over him and then sitting down
Right.
to have my time with the Lord. It's just getting into his word. And this morning I was reading about faith and just how important that is to start my day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you think back to those points we talked through, just that joy is relational, that we have an opportunity to connect with the source of joy, with God through our prayer, through reading his word. I think all those things are great. I thought it was really interesting as Chris kind of talked about the average amount of time people spend on social media. I don't know. I can't remember what it was, like an hour and a half or something.
Yeah, it was
and then
something crazy.
The average Netflix person is like 3 hours a day or something. I don't know. And he started saying like, that's 30 days of your year, or this is 15 years. And again, I'm not correct on these stats. You could go back and listen to Chris's talk if you really want to know, but it's a significant amount of time and a significant part of your year that we spend on things that really aren't important. Not that those things are bad, but when they're taking up so much time.
And then we say we don't have time to spend.
Right. And I think
God's
that was
word.
Chris's point. He's like, I'm not saying this to shame anybody, but just I think we need to be honest about
where our priorities
where our priorities are and how much time we are spending and where we're spending that time. So as a listener, just think about that. Where are you spending your time? Is it too much time on social media, too much time on Netflix, or it could be obviously other things as well. And then where is God in that? I think, like you said, starting your day off is a great way to kind of say, hey, this is my priority. Yeah. God's going to get the first of my day. I think that honors him and helps us establish it as well.
Yeah.
So.
And I will say that I know that when my kids were little, I couldn't always do that the first thing in the morning because they were up before I was.
Right.
And so I had to do it at night after I put them down to bed. But, that was still a priority, is making sure that I still had time in God's word and spent time with him. So, we understand that there are different circumstances in life. But for me now at this point in my life, that's the way I like to start my day.
Yeah, I've had some mentors who've kind of talked, and I've probably changed my routine over the years, but I remember early on people just saying, if you're not a morning person, then don't do it. Like, do it when you feel your best, like when you're going to be able to really connect and spend time with him and all those things. So when you're at your best, that might be the best for you as well. Okay, so that's the weekend recap. Thanks so much for talking through that. Hopefully this has been a great reminder for you. We do have a couple things to talk about as we're moving forward. We have a new series called At Your Best.
Speaking of being at your best, so that's this weekend, At Your Best.
Starting this weekend.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm excited because we're starting our 21 days of prayer and fasting on January 10th, which is also our prayer night.
Yes, that's right.
It's 7 o'clock. So
normally that's the first
Monday of the month, but we've moved it to January 10th to kick off our 21 days of prayer and fasting. So we're excited about that.
So 21 days of prayer and fasting. I mean, we've been doing that for years now. And if you've never done it, just want to encourage you. We do have a website, cedarcreek.tv/21 days. As we get closer to that January 10th date, it'll be on our app and things like that as well. But if you go to that website, just start looking through it. There's some great resources on there, like, hey, this is kind of what to expect. There's some fasting resources because during January we do a fast as well. And if you've never done that, look through the fasting resources, and then it'll kind of help guide you on how to fast and what to fast from and all those different things. So there's some great things to be thinking about. I know for me, I need to really start zeroing in on what I'm going to fast from and be in communicating with my wife, because in the past there's been some times where I've been like, oh, this is what I'm doing, and she's like, what? So if you're I would encourage you, once you've picked that, let those close to you know what you're fasting from, so they can be in on it as well.
Yeah, and be praying for you about it.
For sure.
Yep.
So, well, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to make the Living Out podcast part of it. And we trust and hope that it is a great reminder that God loves you and helps you live out the truth that you matter.